You are listening to Rouge Radio, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
It's time to get the point as Rouge Radio is ready to kick off.
Ready!
The best football talk with the best in the business.
So what is the cost? You have 2 first-round picks this year because the Argos were dumb enough to trade for Drew Willie.
A few rookies.
We go directly to the on-field product. We welcome to the show the 20th overall pick in this past Sunday's CFL draft, DeAndre Wright of the Alouettes. DeAndre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
And the occasional Hall of Famer.
Please welcome Doug Brown, who is one of the members of the current class of 2016 in the CFL Hall of Fame. Doug, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, guys, for the kind words and for having me on the program.
Rouge Radio is on the air. Here's your hosts, Robert Dalton and Tony Allen.
Oh, don't you just love it? It's just last week we were talking about the weather being just completely frozen, and then just like that, snap of Thanos' fingers, and all of a sudden it's like 25 degrees where I am. It's the Rouge Radio Podcast, episode 433. Powered by the Canadian Football Podcast Network, and today we are continuing our 9 teams in 9 weeks. We've done Ottawa, we've done Edmonton, we've done BC, and today we focus on Les Alouettes du Montreal. But first, my name is Robert Dalton, and joining me is Tony Allen. And I mean, we can play like Where's Tony? Are you finally back in Medicine Hat?
I am exhausted. 21 consecutive days of work. Have you ever tried that? That is not fun. So after that and then a car ride home, I'm finally back going to sleep in my own bed tonight. But first we'll tackle the Montreal Alouettes, I guess.
Yeah. We got an email asking, how did you do with your anniversary and Mother's Day around spanning around the same date?
Yeah, no, that was I did not do very well. I'm going to have to use this week off of work here that I have to try and to make good on that one. So we'll see. We'll see if I survive.
Oh, man. And notwithstanding, the Calgary Flames are not doing too well.
Awful.
Or at least, no.
They're awful. They're just awful. I don't even know what to say.
Oh, okay. So you just nipped it on the bud. We're not going to be talking about that.
And I believe this is like we even covered this when we did the Ottawa show like 3 weeks ago, how it's like, oh, we're going to, and I even said there, I'm like, no, I never get optimistic about Flames playoff hockey, and it coming true again.
I haven't really watched any NHL hockey. And is that bad? Like,
no, if you don't have a team in it, you're not obligated. There's those people like, oh, you got to pick a team and watch. It's like, why? My team's not there. I don't care.
Well, it's not even that. It's like, okay, so I don't have a dog in the fight, and then normally, even if the Jets didn't make it, or if they were eliminated after the first round, I'd still watch it. The NHL, like the actual game, has just not been fun in the last month. I mean, I think obviously if you have a team, in the hunt and who is, a true contender like the Calgary Flames, you might just kind of maybe ignore all the negativity, just because you're just so involved in following your team. But if you don't have a dog, you're just like all the negative stuff is just kind of like just, brought to the spotlight, supplementary discipline, suspensions, fines, blowouts, referees, what have you. And can we make this the Rouge Radio Podcast as a football podcast? Can we be the poster boy to get people to stop banging on glasses at hockey games? Can we?
There you go.
Can we stop that? What's the purpose of that? Obviously,
I just want to stop that one dink that stands up in row 4 and turns around because he knows the camera's on him while the play is on. It's like, you know what? There's 15,000 people there. You're not the only one. Sit back down.
Definitely. Okay, that's enough hockey talk on this week's podcast. Let's go to the Rouge Radio listeners by country. Let's get the drum beat going. We've got your Canada, the United States, Germany, France, Bermuda, Australia, Switzerland. Oh, I hear that one listener in Switzerland's a huge plus. Obviously referencing their flag. Brazil, United Kingdom, and Kenya. Top cities listening to our podcast. We've got Winnipeg, Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, Lethbridge, Frankfurt, Vancouver, BC, Victoria, BC, Toronto, and St. Albert, Alberta. I am just going to assume that Lethbridge listener is yourself. You don't remember reading off. Well, now you have to cop to it.
Yeah. What can I say? I like listening to myself talk. No one should be surprised.
Exactly. So before we get into this week's preview, obviously the biggest news that came out through this week is notwithstanding the CFL draft, there were a couple of big-time trades that we'll kind of talk with Cliffy D later on in the podcast. But notwithstanding some, I guess, collective bargaining news, this standard stuff, and I love, interacting on Twitter. I really do. Like, the CFL family on Twitter is just like there's nothing better than interacting with them. Nothing better.
Mm-hmm.
But some of you guys need to just calm down when stuff that always happens. It's like springtime when the snow melts and then a week later there's a huge snowstorm. It always happens. Maybe this year it happened more than ever, but it always happens. And so the CFLPA voted to strike. People lost their crap, lost their shit, saying, this season's never going to happen, blah, yada, yada. It's a standard union thing. But one thing I really noticed about this year is the Players Association from other leagues, the all the major leagues, notwithstanding, or with the exception of the NFL, all tweeted out their backing of the CFLPA. So I thought that was kind of cool. Any thoughts? Because I don't know, like, nothing has really happened for me as a longtime fan of this league that really got me a little bit worried about any kind of non-season in 2022. So we'll get your thoughts, quick thoughts on this.
Yeah, and every collective bargaining agreement, it's a broken record. Like you say, there's going to be the threats, there's going to be the 11th hour, nope, we're pulling out, we're not making it, and then they'll make good. I mean, everything is just doing its standard routine. Like you said, other PAs, though, speaking up is a new twist, but I don't think is going to influence anything. The CFL is going to make an outrageous offer that is not serious and not their final offer. The CBA or the CFLPA is going to go all crazy and accuse them of not getting respect, and it's all insults, and we thought we had a partner in this. Arash Modani will tweet out that the league isn't going to survive and this is the year it dies because we can't survive a year without a season, despite the fact we literally survived a year without a season 2 years ago. And then we'll end up having a football season. Like, I don't know what else to say. It's going to be the same things, and everything's going to work out, and we're going to have a CFL season because we've never not had it. Because these players know it's important. Like, you're telling me these players who were willing to do literally anything to play 2 seasons ago when COVID was a thing, and they were ready to risk their health and their safety because of COVID so that they could just play football. All they want to do is play football. And suddenly 2 years ago, they're ready to cast an entire season away. No, I'm not buying it. It'll work out. There's going to be serious drama. Of course, there'll be people claiming this is the end of the Canadian Football League. And even if worst case, we miss a week or two, we miss training camp games, we'll have a 2022 season.
Yeah, I think at most, if there was going to be anything, you might not see a preseason game, which may benefit the Winnipeg Blue Bombers again, because the last time that there wasn't a preseason was last year, and the Bombers went back to back. So that bodes well for the Bombers. 8 hours ago, the CFLPA sent out a statement from the CFL Players Association. We have instructed all veteran quarterbacks not to attend the voluntary sessions held this week and to align with the decisions our association will make regarding training camps. The directive has been given across the league with the exception of one club where there is concern by our association over a pattern of retribution towards players by team management. First, one guess. Who do you think that club is?
Calgary Stampeders.
You think so? I'm thinking Edmonton. I'm thinking it's Chris Jones. That's just me. Maybe I don't know. The pessimistic part of me thinks that Chris Jones is back to his old tricks. But why do you think that it's the Calgary Stampeders?
I would just say, I guess Huff isn't hateful, but Huff wants you to know he never needs you. You need him to play in the Canadian Football League, and he doesn't need you, and you will be replaced. To me, that's just how he comes across to me, and I don't mean he's a bad guy, but he's in charge. It's his way or the highway, and that's why Huffnagel would jump into my head. Now, you would have to be hateful to actually target a player and make his life miserable because of whatever reason, just to be spiteful. I guess that does have Chris Jones written all over it. He's more... he would do it just for the sake of doing it, I suppose.
Oh, man.
Out of enjoyment. Huff would do it to prove a point. Chris Jones would just do it because he'll laugh and giggle and... have a good and just love it.
Oh, what I wouldn't give to just be a fly on the wall just to hear Chris Jones giggle.
Yeah.
Earlier on, we talked to Cliffy D as we were previewing the Montreal Alouettes, the 2022 version. So here's a little snippet of the interview that happened earlier on.
Training camp starts.
What is the environment, the quarterback environment of Montreal right now? Because you lost Matthew Schultz as he wanted a little bit more of a bigger role outside of Montreal. You signed Dominic Davis with the expectation that Trevor Harris was going to be released. Now you brought back Trevor Harris. Is there kind of is there in fact role that Trevor Harris will in fact be the backup quarterback, or did they just quietly release Dominic Davis and nobody really cared?
Well, if they released Dominic Davis, it would be quite the surprise because he was actually at this mini camp that Vernon Adams held for his offensive units. So that would be definitely news to me. And I think in not so many ways, the fact that Davis was invited to this camp and Harris wasn't, I don't think it was a case necessarily of Vernon Davis holding a grudge against Trevor Harris. I don't think he's like that at all, to tell you the honest truth. I just think it was a matter of who he thought he'd be actually truly working with in 2022. And I guess for whatever reason, he seems to think a little bit more of Davis being a better fit as far as a backup goes versus Harris. But again, we won't know this entirely until training camp gets underway, but it does make for a very interesting dynamic as far as how Vernon Adams sees this football team.
The CFL draft, or the CFL held its annual draft this last week. The Montreal Alouettes made a couple of trades. They moved up to number 1 overall, and they moved again with the trade with Winnipeg to move again another pick into the first round. What's the expectations with the 2 first-round picks and first overall Tyrell Richards and the 9th overall pick Tyson Philpott?
Well, Richards, as everybody knows, he was like the consensus number 1 pick on all the mock drafts, and a lot of the CFL draft experts were highly touting Richards' ability. And again, it seemed like it was going to be a done deal. He'd be going to Edmonton, but lo and behold, Danny Machocha clearly saw something he liked in this guy and made the moves in order to get him as the first overall pick. I was very surprised and pleasantly surprised, actually. I think Richards will be an immediate impact for this football team. He'll get a chance to play with guys like Chris Aki and Brian Harlamana, who was also a draft pick in 2020 for the Alouettes. I think these are some of the young linebackers that are going to really make an impact, and the fact that they're national players too just makes a good thing even better as far as I'm concerned. In addition, with Tyson Philpott, I was a little surprised, but maybe I shouldn't have been, considering the Alouettes made moves to really focus on the national receiver position. They signed Hergy Mayala in free agency. They've already got Kion Julian Grant and Rashawn Simonides, who are also both national players. So it seems like the focus is they're going to try to have a Canadian receiver on the field as much as possible. So in which case, why wouldn't you add a Tyson Philpott to the mix? And from what I've seen, he's been an exceptionally fantastic football player along with his twin brother. I guess only time will tell too whether we got the better of the two Philpott brothers, but just the fact that we've got one of these guys in camp is going to make things very interesting as far as the receiver position goes.
So over the years, like these last couple of years, I've been a big booster of the Montreal Alouettes, kind of implying they're going to turn the corner. We're going to see the old Alouettes team of the 2000s, late 90s, what have you, rise up and dominate the East. And they haven't really backed up my support. So for you being closer to the club, what's kind of your expectations? Were you agreeing with me that this team's on the rise and still trending, or they might have looked good, but they could be plateauing? What's a realistic expectation? If I'm an Alouettes fan and we're talking over a beer or something, what would you tell me is a realistic expectation for this club?
I think what we saw in 2019 was an anomaly. It was something that wasn't expected to happen, but my goodness, it made things really exciting. And of course, with the lost 2020 season, a lot of people were wondering, can the Alouettes maintain that momentum? And I think for the most part they had when 2021 got underway, and things kind of plateaued a little bit once Vernon Adams got injured and Trevor Harris was summoned to duty. At that point, it didn't seem like it was the same team quite at all. I wouldn't say they were in a bad way, but at the same time, like they were kind of coasting a little bit as far as the good momentum they had built, and kind of just sort of backed themselves into the playoffs and then ended up in the same position that they were in 2019, losing in the first round, which is disappointing because, again, the thought was, okay, this is more or less the same team, but they still got the same coaching staff for the most part, and they've added a few interesting pieces. Like, this is a team that should have gone further than what they did, and they didn't. So as far as 2022 goes, I got that general consensus during the offseason that the goal was to keep as much of the core elements in place, which I think they've done a very good job of doing. The pieces that have been added to this roster have been very pleasant surprises, and ones that I think will actually work very well. Cap all that off with a very, very solid draft as far as I'm concerned. And I really think this Alouettes team is putting the pieces together in order to become a team that will go past the first round. So that's my expectation for them as far as 2022 goes, is to be better than just good enough to get into the playoffs and then do nothing with it. Like, I expect this team to be at least in the Eastern Final, whether they're the first team in the East or the second or even the third, and then somehow manage to get into the Eastern Final. I expect this football team to be better than it was and better than it's shown in 2021.
You mentioned the anomaly. Is it safe to say that maybe the feeling around Montreal is, it's almost as if the Alouettes didn't even make the playoffs in 2021?
In some respects, because Vernon Adams didn't play, and I think, like as I said, this is pretty much his football team. He was not perfect in 2021 by any stretch of the imagination. There was a lot of times where he played lights out football, and then other times where he did not. And call it a sophomore jinx as a starter, call it whatever you will, but I think this really is his football team, and I think he realizes that as well, and he realizes what has to be done as far as him being a leader on this team. And I think he's taken the steps in order to prove that and show that he has that leadership capability. So I think if he stays healthy this year, I think he's going to make sure that everybody understands and realizes that this is very much a real football team, and they just have to realize that potential within themselves.
Speaking of fan favorites, the head coach, Kahari Jones, was rumored as of I don't know if it was a couple days ago or at least a week or two ago, there were reports that he is on the hot seat. What's the expectation with Kahari Jones? What if the Montreal Alouettes come out of the gate 0-5? Is there an expectation that maybe they want a new voice on the sidelines in Montreal?
I think by and large, the players still have his back because he's had their back for so long. I want to believe that these guys want to play for Kahari Jones. I have a hard time believing that he's lost them in any ways. Obviously, he didn't do quite as well in 2021 as he did in 2019, but I think that's to be, you almost have to take last year as a mulligan as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it kind of doesn't count because it wasn't quite a 100% CFL season as we've come to expect. This year is supposed to be with a full 18-game schedule and so on. Is Kahari on the hot seat? I think there's definitely pressure on him. I'm reluctant to say hot seat, if only because I know what kind of a coach he is. I know what he's capable of doing. I think we've seen what he's been able to accomplish. And realistically, if he's got the right players in place and the moves that have been made during the offseason are going to matter like I think they should, I think, barring something, again, going 0-4, the pressure will be on for sure. But if he goes, say, 1-3 or 2-2, I think they're still going to give him the benefit of the doubt as far as I'm concerned. And if he goes 4-0 to start the season, well, then all this is just going to be just talk, just scuttlebutt as far as I'm concerned.
All right, so something a little bit lighter here. What do you think of the Montreal Alouettes' new buckets, the new helmets? Do you like how they cleaned it up and they've gone away from that whole full helmet logo? Play fashionista for us here. You
know what? I said this on the podcast last week was I don't hate it, but I'm kind of disappointed because at least the previous incarnation of this helmet was original and really stood out from all the other ones. Like now I just find it the new helmet, if you will, there's no difference between that and any other helmet in the CFL. Like I like the fact that the Alouettes were at least trying to think outside the box and be a little bit original with their design. And now it's just like, okay, well, it's just like any other helmet you'd find on any other team in North America. Like I like the fact that they were being original, and now it's just kind of cookie cutter. Like, okay, like I don't hate it. Don't get me wrong. I understand why they did it. I'm sure there was a lot of cost cutting measures. And if you ever wanted to do like a retro game, then yeah, it's obviously easier to peel off a sticker versus having to deal with a helmet that was kind of with the logo painted on, which is what it was before. Mm-hmm. So I get why they made this switch, but at the same time, I don't know. I just felt like it was like, you're just making change for the sake of change. And I'm not a big fan of that. Like,
and I understand what you're saying too. Yeah, I understand what you're saying too, because I felt the same way about the BC Lions when they went really off the grid with that helmet design they had a few years back, and I just loved it. Finally, it was someone taking a chance, and then we just went back to side logos again on the helmet. So I definitely understand where you're coming from with that comment.
Yeah, like to me, it's like, okay, like I'm all for original. I'm all for trying new stuff and seeing how it works. And I kind of get why you'd want to have the side logos and all that. And as I said, there's probably tons of cost cutting measures or just, financial reasons for making a move like this. But to me, I can't help but feel like this was just change for the sake of change.
A quick question here in regards to, I guess, regarding free agency, because the Alouettes seem to be kind of quiet on the Western Front, so to speak, in free agency. Is there someone that really jumped out of you that the Alouettes acquired that you just can't wait to see what they could do this upcoming season?
Without question, I think Hergy Maela is going to be an impact player for the Alouettes. I think when I saw him in Calgary, I thought he definitely was. He definitely had a role, and he suited it very well. He kind of fell off a little bit in 2021, but I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Bo Levi was dinged up quite a bit, so maybe they weren't able to connect the way that they should have. And now he's back home, so to speak, because he's a Montreal native, so now he gets a chance to play for the hometown team. And I got a feeling that he and Vernon Adams are going to make some major connections, and I think they're really going to get the fans out of their seats. So I'm really excited to see what Hergy can do for the Alouettes.
There we go. And one last question, unless Tony has one. The Alouettes, obviously, notwithstanding the draft day trades that they made, they also made a very significant trade with sending Tony Washington to Edmonton in exchange for Mike Moore. With the added trade moving up in the draft and with the free agencies acquisitions, is there more of a more leaning towards that there needs to be an improvement on the defensive side? Because that seems to be where the Alouettes coaching staff has kind of made the adjustments and acquisitions.
Without question. Like they took a lot of hits in free agency as far as the defense goes. And I look at the current defensive unit now, and there's a lot of young guys that I think are going to be asked to step up and make that move to the next level. And quite frankly, it's going to be sink or swim for these guys. Like they've got talent, and it's just a matter of now you're getting the opportunity to show what you can do. And I think that's going to make a huge difference. And honestly, I think this defensive unit, not perfect, but I definitely see some good young pieces there. And now they've got like a little bit extra years worth of experience and a little bit more seasoning. I'm really curious to see, like, when I go to training camp this year, I will definitely be paying a lot of attention to the defense because I think the secondary was good for the most part last year, but definitely had a lot of holes. I'm curious to see if those holes have now been plugged up, if the defensive line can still hold up and still be as dominant as it was throughout the year. And of course, now with the addition of Tyrell Richards, this linebacking core, which at first was looking a little bit thin, I definitely now think if with him in the picture, if he can live up to the hype, if he can live up to the expectations that have been set forth for him, it's going to make for a very fun defense. Although, like all three assets of the defense are going to look, I think, very interesting, and I'm excited to see what these guys can do.
All right, there we go. And final question, as we always do when we do these season previews. Cliff, last year the Montreal Alouettes finished 7-7. What is your honest-to-God prediction of the Alouettes? Where will they finish in the Eastern Division? And bonus points, brownie points, if you could nail down the exact season record.
I don't think 10-8 is out of the question, quite frankly, because I take a look at what's going on in the East. Ottawa has made some major wholesale changes, so they're not the same team as they were last year. Toronto and Hamilton, they're still making moves. They're still trying to, like, those are two teams you definitely cannot keep out of the picture. But I think all the teams in the East are going to improve. I think they'll all be a lot better. But I think Montreal they've got the talent, as far as I'm concerned, to go at least 10-8 and be either second or third in the division. And I do fully expect them to make it to the Eastern final at least. They've got to get past that hump. They got to get past this Eastern semifinal if they're playing in it. So unless somehow they manage to win the division, which is not out of the question either, but I think 10-8 is a reasonable expectation for this team, and to be in the Eastern final, whether they're hosting or participating, that's pretty much where I've set the benchmark for this team this year.
Well, that was Cliffy D, one half of the co-host. I guess he's not one half of a co-host. One of the co-hosts of the Alouette Flight Deck podcast. Looking forward to talking with him throughout this year. The full interview will be available on our YouTube page. Again, just go to YouTube and you'll get a lot of content working on some trade trees. As I tweeted out earlier this week, there's a trade that happened in 2014 that led up to the trade that Montreal used to trade up to acquire the first overall pick. I will be filming that later this week, and it's a dandy. It is a dandy. The Rouge Radio podcast is sponsored by Manscaped.com. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code Rouge at Manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at Manscaped.com and use code Rouge. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped. Tony, use the Manscaped when you're traveling to Lethbridge?
No, that would look weird if I was doing a traveling to Lethbridge and someone just looks over and I'm shaving my chest in the
not in the car. I guess at the hotel. No.
No, it's just me there. So
I mean, yeah, that would
be to look good for there.
that would be weird though if you're just doing it as you're driving.
Yeah, that would be awkward.
You get a cop just pulling you over. Sir, you were swerving in and out. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I swear it was just.
Maybe like, have you ever tried to shave your balls while you were driving? It's not easy.
In Winnipeg, you're swerving just to avoid all the potholes.
Yeah.
And, it's the only time where you can actually be drunk and nobody assumes that you are.
Yeah.
All right, let's focus on the Montreal Alouettes. Last year in the shortened 14-game season, they went 7-7, 346 points for, 305 points against, 3-4 at home, and 4-3 away. The list of people who have who left the Alouettes is it's not long. You got Woody Barron, Ty Cranston, B.J. Cunningham, and Taekwon Glass in. Mike Jones and Rigi Mayala, as we heard Cliffy D talking about the impact of the Stampeder or the former Stampeder receiver. Tony, what are your thoughts, your prediction of the 2022 version of the Montreal Alouettes?
Well, I had mentioned with Cliffy while we were chatting that I have been pumping the tires on the Alouettes for a couple seasons here, and they just do not want to seem to rise up and be that team I thought they were, and maybe now I'm starting to lower my expectations on this football club. I still like it. I think they're going to be a decent club. They could probably even be better than what I'm going to predict, and it's not a horrible thing. It's not going to be BC Lions level of horrible, but I just don't like bringing Trevor Harrison, even if he's a backup. I don't think Trevor Harris lifts your team up in any aspect. And there'll be people, I know Trevor Harris, I've seen him, why do you think Ottawa, blah, blah, blah. That's fine, but I don't think he brings a plethora of CFL success, enough of it, to the Montreal Alouettes that he'll be able to guide that locker room to the promised land based on what he's accomplished in the Canadian Football League, other than getting a contract he clearly didn't deserve from the Edmonton Football Club and being a superstar up there for a couple seasons. I like Vernon Adams. I've always loved Vernon Adams. I think he's one of the best, biggest personalities in the Canadian Football League. Even when you go through the roster, you see a lot of stalwarts there that are going to help carry this football club. Again, I don't know why I see the name Frederick Plessius, and for some reason I just remember how big he was supposed to be in Hamilton, and almost one of those names. It's like, wow, he's still in the Canadian Football League. But I mean, that was just a name that pops up that was funny to see floating around. Maybe it's just me, but I mean, I see the same Montreal club, but maybe not the success that came with it that I had seen in the past. I have a rough year for the East. I don't know if I was just in a grumpy mood when I did my schedule and went through and picked clubs. Maybe I need to take it a little bit more serious. Not a great season for the East as a whole after doing very well last year. I'm putting Montreal at 8-10, which is good for second in the East because I have them pretty weak and the West looking strong.
Oh, geez. That is, I mean, as far as second in the East, that with that record, well, you're really discounting Ottawa. And here comes the red-black hate. By the way, you mentioned BC. I am amazed that we did not get any BC Lions hate mail this week.
Yeah.
But we got
I was ruthless.
But we got listeners that took that really cared for your anniversary, though.
Yeah, that's good.
Cliffy mentioned that they wanted to make sure to keep the core, and that's good. Like, that's a good thing. If you can keep the core together and then add on to it, that's great. The problem in Montreal is the core. I mean, it's not a bad team. It's not a bad roster. Jake Weineke, Geno Lewis, probably one of the best 1-2 punches in receiver that could probably be matched up by, I don't know, Brian Burnham and Lucky Whitehead, in BC. I mean, that's a pretty decent receiving 1-2 punch. You've got William Stanback behind, running the ball. You've got a very, very decent defensive line. If Terrell Richards signs and he shows up to camp, you've got a bona fide stud linebacker that could just help, transition between the defensive line and a promising secondary that they have. My issue is the offensive line. Are they going to be able to, create holes for Stanback? Are they going to be able to keep Vernon Adams upright? Are they? And if knock on wood, if God forbid, if Trevor Harris comes in, are they going to make or give him an opportunity to move the ball consistently downfield? That to me is a little bit of a question mark. Special teams wise, okay, they may get better, or they might kind of tread water. But that to me is, like Cliffy touched on, is that linebacking crew. That kind of is a little question mark, and that offensive line is a question mark for me. And so when we mentioned about the core roster of this team and adding on to it, you're looking at guys like Hergy Mayala. You guys look at like I touched on, Mike Jones. I don't know if those guys are good players. I don't know if those guys are premier talent that you can add on to the core that could immediately improve your roster. So when I look back and I'm looking at their schedule and I'm looking how immediately improved the Ottawa Redblacks will be, and how dominant the Tiger Cats would be, I have the Montreal Alouettes sitting at 7-11 this year, and that's good for third in the East. But there's opportunity to kind of switch. I have them have a couple of those games that might be close, so they have an opportunity to kind of switch those around to maybe switch it from a 7-11 to a 10-8 record. So they have that opportunity, but as it stands right now, I'm like, Buzzard, my final guess is a 7-11 finish for the 2022 season. And we are kind of really, I mean, notwithstanding the, wait till we preview the Toronto Argonauts, but aside from your prediction with BC, we're kind of on the same wavelengths with our record, and I kind of like that. It kind of means that we may know what we're talking about.
Maybe, just maybe.
Next week, as we continue our 9 teams in 9 weeks, oh God, it's the Calgary Stampeders. And you could just hear, you could just feel Tony's eyes just glazing as he just cannot wait. Will the Calgary Flames be eliminated by then so he could just turn his attention fully onto the CFL, or will they just turn it on and eliminate the Dallas Stars by then? But we have confirmation, almost 99% sure, Ryan Ballantyne from the CFL Horseman podcast to come on talking about Big Brother. No, I'm joking. We might talk Big Brother, but we'll definitely focus more on the Calgary Stampeders. That'll wrap it up for episode 433 of the Rouge Radio podcast. Tony, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Mostly just that I'm hoping in like 15 days or whenever it is, we end up with our first preseason football game. And let's get those darn things televised. It's 2022 preseason football games should be televised by now.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of them, preseason games. But are you saying that you want all of them broadcast?
All of them.
All of them.
Let's do it. Yeah, well, maybe not the first couple. The end ones where the starters get in. All of those. How many we 3 weeks of preseason now? Are we up to that?
3 weeks of preseason, and I think there's like 1 or 2 a week. For preseason, I'm okay with that. As long as each team is represented, I'm okay with each team having one. Because oh man, you're right. If the second preseason game is usually when you get the guys that have kind of earned an additional audition from the first week, but you also want to get your main starter, the guys who are for a fact are going to make the team. You want them to get in the groove of the game right?
And the thing is, it's not that I'm a super scout and I'm not a student of the game and I don't break down plays, but there is a part of me that used to like going when I lived in Calgary and had my season tickets. There was a part of me that liked to go to that one exhibition game we had or the preseason game and, check guys out. Like, okay, let's see who might crack the lineup now. Like, I still remember the year that happened with Nick Lewis and, because he went on to be probably the best one, we just like randomly picked up. We had a lot of good ones, but like I remember the Nick Lewis one thing, and Jesus, Nick Lewis kid seems great. And one thing, maybe my memory fades over time of Nick Lewis, but the one thing I'll always remember about him is him being impressive like that and quietly being impressive, and then Jermaine Copeland showing up and just completely corrupting him, and he became one of the biggest personalities in the Canadian Football League. But I just remember him having, it seems like I remember having such a quiet personality, and he quietly went about his business, and then Copeland showed up, and it was all bets off. Then the end zone celebrations started, and it was craziness after that. But overall, I don't know if you're the same way. Again, maybe you are a little more into the analyzing potential players, but it is nice to watch a game and say, okay, this kid might be good. Like, I'm going to keep my eye on this guy now if he gets into a game this year, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's funny because when teams announce transactions during the offseason, okay, you don't know these guys, but sometimes the teams will actually tweet out YouTube highlights or something like that, and you're like, okay, that's I like the name, I like blah 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 blah, I like to if especially if he's like a receiver or a running back, right? Because those are the the sexy positions, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody really cares if you signed an unknown offensive or defensive lineman, right? So you look forward and he's got a cool name. You see him on the depth chart. You're like, okay, he doesn't look out of place. And then you just become like very depressed when he's one of the final cuts. So
like, it's funny you even mentioned those YouTube videos too. Like the Calgary Stampeders they sign a quarterback named Tommy Stevens this off season, and of course they post his highlight reels, because the one thing I've learned since we started this podcast is players really like to put together their highlight packages, and a couple of times we'll get tagged in them and try to get their names around. And I watched this Tommy Stevens highlights, and the one thing I loved immediately is the kid can run. Like, I love that aspect of a quarterback that essentially adds a third running back into your backfield. So like I'm excited to see this kid play. So I'd love to see a preseason game to see if he's gonna call his own number and carry that rock a few times.
Yeah. All I heard from that is that you were a huge fan of Chris Trevler.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, who wasn't? Actually, no one likes Chris Trevler. The football player, they love Chris Trevler, the booze hound, the party animal.
The Grey Cup parade celebrator. Yeah, they love that guy. Well, that'll do it for episode 433, and I haven't done this in a while, but let's end this show with a dad joke. Tony, are you ready?
Go ahead.
All right. Sundays are always a little sad, but the day before is a Saturday.
I'm too tired for that.
No, I got to tell that to my wife and have, I can actually get the in-person groan.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. For Tony, I'm Dalts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.